Kent Hovind is about to lay out his conspiracy theory about how the world works in his mind. Now, this part stands independently of the other one. I'll give context if it's missing. But in the previous part, he spent the entire time basically lining up all of these little facts and ideas, or supposed facts, and now he's going to piece them all together into a cohesive story. In the previous one, he said mammoths were flash frozen instantly. That's not true. That works in cartoons, not in real life. In this one, he uses that claim to kind of build up a whole cohesive conspiracy. So in the previous part, he said mammoths were flash frozen, and I disproved that. They were not flash frozen like in a cartoon. That's not how it works.
If you go to the North Pole, you'll be kind of chilly, and one of only 400 people that have ever been there. But up around the North Pole, there's an ocean called the Arctic Ocean. I went up to see the Arctic Ocean a couple years ago, and the guy said, "Hey, Brother Hovind, you know something interesting about this ocean? It has no tide." I said, "Man, I never thought of that. Taught her science for 15 years. Arctic Ocean has no tide." And
fuck, I just heard a weird noise. Let's see. Does the Arctic Ocean have no tide? No, that's false. It does have tides. It does have tides. He's just wrong. Like, he just says whatever. This is this seminar series, it's like a work of art, in all seriousness. It's very detailed. He's jumped through all the hoops and done all of the work to research and sit there and done the slides. I mean, how long did the seminar series take to create? Forever, dude. Forever. Probably. Years, maybe. It's a magnum opus. And he just says shit randomly. You cannot convince me that the shit that he says on this was not intentional and knowing. He must have known that this shit was a lie, right?
who cares, right? Anyway, but there's an island up there called the New Siberian Islands off the coast of Russia. There on those New Siberian Islands, they find frozen bobcats, frozen lynx, frozen camels. What?
Hang on. Frozen bobcats, bison, camels, and mammoths?
Bobcat. Arctic Ocean has no tide. And who cares, right? Anyway, but there's an island up there called the New Siberian Islands off the coast of Russia. There on those New Siberian Islands, they find frozen bobcats, frozen lynx, frozen camels. What happened? When they drill down through the ice, when they get to the South Pole and drill through the ice, they find coal under the ice at the South Pole.
Okay, here's what's actually been found on the New Siberian Islands. The New Siberian Islands contain abundant bones and skeletons of mammoth, rhinoceros, woolly rhino, and musk ox preserved by permafrost. A scientific study of the Ogios Yar coast found fossil bones from 13 species, predominantly woolly mammoths, steppe bison, horse, and reindeer, with radiocarbon ages spanning from about 48,000 to 4,500 years BP. I don't know what that means. That's from Frontiers. I'm unfamiliar with Frontiers. Frontiers in Earth Science. There's no evidence of bobcats. Camels need more research. So the claim, I'm skeptical of the claims, but yeah, I'm skeptical of the claims here, but I'm not sure why any of it matters. Let's continue.
I would like to point out, Your Honor, there are no trees in Antarctica. Zero.
I don't know about that, but okay.
Admiral Byrd went down there and said they saw frozen palm trees or palm leaves near the South Pole.
There are no trees, but he found frozen palm leaves near the pole. Just looking here. Sorry, give me a second. All right, Antarctica palm fossils. Fossil pollen from palm trees and relatives of tropical baobab trees have been found in have been found in sediment cores drilled from the seafloor off the coast of Wilkes Land, Antarctica, dating to approximately 52 million years ago during the early Eocene period. This is according to Science Daily and Physics.org. Antarctica has extensive fossil forests, including fossilized wood, pollen, spores, and exceptionally preserved leaves from ferns, pines, mosses. So yes, there are palm-related fossils in Antarctica. Here's what he gets wrong. There were not frozen palm leaves. The palm evidence comes from fossil pollen grains recovered from sediment cores drilled over a kilometer below the seafloor. These are not frozen leaves that you can pick up. They're microscopic pollen preserved in ancient marine sediments, okay?
Scientists have discovered all sorts of frozen leaves, even dinosaur fossils, plant-eating dinosaurs near the South Pole. Thousands of well-preserved leaves found in Antarctica.
Not well-preserved leaves. That's not true. That's a lie. Again, he told so many lies in this, I can't even count them all. Actually, I wonder if we could count the lies. You know, I've got this video analysis program that I wrote recently. I call it Clippy. And I basically send a video into the program through as like a URL or like a local file or something. And I have my program basically analyze the video to find any sections where they talk about like politics or religion or whatever else. I'm thinking maybe I should send this video through and see if I can catch all of the lies. Just tell it to find all the lies. That would be useful, right?
Leaves on the side of a cliff 250 miles from the South Pole. And the leaves still retain their original cellular structure and organic content. They're not petrified. They're preserved. They find dinosaurs, plant-eating dinosaurs, in northern Alaska.
I don't know. Okay, yes, sure, maybe. I don't understand what the hang-up is here. I mean, there's coal in Alaska, so...
No trees up there. I was there. Nothing. Not a blade of grass in most places.
Yeah, that's because the Earth changes. Are you really surprised by this? By the way, Rad, thank you so much for being a member. I really appreciate that.
See, the Earth actually has two North Poles. We have a geographic North Pole where we spin around. We also have a magnetic North Pole in Canada where the compass actually points.
Okay.
Now here in Tennessee, it probably doesn't make a lick of difference. Your compass points north because both of them pretty much line up. But if you live in Alaska, your magnetic north is way different than the real north, and pilots have to learn to adjust for that. And who cares, right? Okay. I think what happened, the mammoths were up there chomping on their tropical flowers. It was a beautiful day, and it began to snow, super cold snow. They had never seen snow before. One of the mammoths looked at his buddy and he said, Herman, this is peculiar weather we're having here. What is this white stuff falling out of the sky?
It's manna.
I said, I don't know, but let's get out of here. They started running around trying to find a place to hide, and the snow got deeper and deeper and deeper, and they got stuck in the snow standing up, and they couldn't even fall down.
But this is nonsense, of course. I disproved this previously.
Deeper and deeper and deeper, and they got stuck in the snow standing up, and they couldn't even fall down. How many of you have ever been in a snowdrift so deep you couldn't even fall over? You ever been in one of those? I think that's what happened to the mammoths.
That's not how it works. That we have evidence that that's not how it worked.
People say,
he said that there was food in their teeth and in their stomach that was undigested. That's not true.
well, the mammoths have long hair. They're designed for cold weather. No, mammoths are not designed for cold weather.
Okay.
A lot of animals in the jungle have long hair where it's hot, okay? If the temperature is 70 degrees, long hair is just simply a decoration.
Okay.
It's neither, and there's a lot of things about the mammoth that shows they are not designed for cold weather. There's a whole section just in this book about mammoths are not designed for cold weather.
Okay. All right. Well, let's find out then, shall we? No need to wonder. Just loaded up our question gun. Let's go answer hunting. The hair being for decoration, I find that particularly interesting because there's almost never anything that is purely for decoration in evolutionary history. It all serves a purpose. Peacocks aren't just for decoration. They are to attract a mate. That's why their feathers are so pretty and colorful and everything. That's not just decoration. That is to attract a mate. But okay, regarding the mammoth claim here, where it's just for decoration, they're extremely well adapted for cold. He claims mammoth hair was just for decoration, and that is one of the most ridiculous things he said. Woolly mammoths were among the most cold-adapted mammals ever to exist. Here's the evidence. The fur was complex and functional. Woolly mammoths had a layered coat with long outer guard hairs, some up to 3 feet long, and a dense undercoat with numerous sebaceous glands in their skin that secreted oils into their hair to improve insulation, repel water, and give the fur a glossy sheen. You know that mammoths are about as old as the pyramids, I believe. Let me just verify that. Yeah, they were around when the pyramids were being built. Mammoths aren't actually that old. And I think it's feasible that we could probably kind of recreate some mammoths at some point. Like, I think we're kind of on the road to doing so already, right? Anyway, let me continue here. small ears and tail heat conservation. Woolly mammoths had ears that were far smaller than modern elephants, about 38 centimeters long versus modern elephants 180 centimeters, and short tails, only 36 centimeters long versus 28 to 33 vertebrae in modern elephants, to reduce heat loss and prevent frostbite. They were extremely well adapted to the cold. They also have a thick layer of fat. They had cold adapted blood, antifreeze hemoglobin. There were other cold adaptations too, but they absolutely are adapted to the cold is the bottom line here. Again, they're not that old. It feels like they were around with the dinosaurs, and I think that they were, but they were also around with the pyramids.
And read all about that. So the mammoths, some of them, ended up frozen standing up in super cold ice, 300 below zero.
It's nonsense. I believe that's physically impossible on Earth. I think that the lowest it can be is 200 and something on Earth. In space, I think it can be 470 something based on the fact that it's a vacuum. I could be mistaken there.
As the ice goes pushing out toward the equator, it's going to carve out glacial grooves. If you live in Ohio, if you go out to Kelly's Island, you can go out in the Lake Erie and see the glacial grooves, scratches across the rock for miles. I think the ice age really happened, but it happened at the beginning of the flood. There are basically two theories among creationists about the ice age. One theory says the ice age caused the flood, which is what I believe. The other theory says the flood caused the ice age. A minor difference. I don't think it's worth fighting over, but
the ice age caused the flood, or the flood caused the ice age. Interesting.
Either case, though, I think the flood or the ice age would last several hundred years after the flood. During the time after the flood, as populations are growing, if somebody misbehaves, instead of building a jail and putting them in there where you got to feed them for the rest of their life, just banish them. Say, get out of here. You can't stay with our civilization. And boy, if times were hard and just new struggling civilization like Gilligan's Island, being banished is punishment enough. Now, you're going to follow the ice age animals around and kill them and, leave your toolbox behind because you don't want to carry 50 pounds of rocks with you. You wait till you find the mammoth herd and you make your tools on the spot and kill the mammoth. That's why they find, scrapers for skin and all kinds of flint arrowheads and stuff are found all over the world. These guys are, they really do use these stone tools to kill these animals, but they don't carry them with them because they're so plentiful. They're found all over the arrowheads and stuff like that. Anyway, then this super cold ice at the pole would send off a cold wave, like when you open the freezer and the cold air comes out and falls at your feet. This cold air hitting warm air would cause it to rain. And it rained 40 days and 40 nights. The canopy collapsed. The Bible says all the fountains of the deep were broken up in one day. If you read the book of Jasher, you can get it from our ministry. I cannot verify that it's legitimate, the actual book of Jasher referred to in the Bible.
Then why would he be advertising for it? I don't think that's a very good idea.
There is a book of Jasher referred to in the Bible. This may or may not be it. I don't know. But it's interesting reading nonetheless. In the book of Jasher it says, "And on that day the Lord caused the whole earth to shake, and the sun darkened, and the foundations of the world raged, and the whole..."
Yes, Dr. Hayes says, funny how the Bible mentions absolutely none of this.
"Earth was moved violently, and lightning flashed, and the thunder roared, and all the foundations of the earth were broken up." Jasher chapter 6. Interesting. I think what happened, the dump of ice on the poles caused the earth's crust to crack. Ice spread out toward the equator, buried the mammoths, made the earth wobble, and earth was totally covered by water. The Bible says all the high hills were covered. Now, there are some idiots out there teaching it was just a local flood in the days of Noah.
It was absolutely just a local flood. There's no evidence of a global flood. Zero. In fact, there's less than zero evidence of this. It's nonsense.
The Bible says the high hills were covered. It's not a local flood. If the earth were reduced down to the size of this globe right here, all the oceans in the world would only fill about 1 tablespoon.
Okay, wait a minute now. Hang on, one more time.
Globe right here. All the oceans, the Bible says the high hills were covered. It's not a local flood. If the earth were reduced down to the size of this globe right here, all the oceans in the world would only fill about 1 tablespoon.
Okay, let me just verify that. That doesn't sound right. Was reduced down to the size of a globe. All the Earth's oceans would fill about a tablespoon. I'm sorry, I'm doubting this heavily. Let's see here. Surprisingly, I think he might be correct, approximately. That's very interesting. 71% of Earth's surface is covered by water. That's the important metric for life and climate. Average ocean depth is about 4 kilometers. Earth's average ocean depths, according to NASA Science, the NASA Science website. Earth's radius is 6,300 kilometers. So oceans are a thin shell, but they cover most of the planet. That's really interesting. Okay. You'd think that you would think that it would be more. That's nuts. One would think that if it were that thin and it were the size of the globe, you'd be able to see straight to the bottom through the ocean if it were that, if it were that thin.
If you smoothed out the Earth, the oceans right now would be 12,000 feet deep. Oceans average 12,000 feet deep. But if you smoothed out the Earth, they would average 8,000 feet deep everywhere. There's plenty of water on the Earth to cover the planet. Technically, one drop of water would cover the planet if you spread it real thin. I mean, real thin.
No, I don't think that's true, but okay.
I flew back over to Pacific one time, and I came back, I said to one of the guys in my office, I said, man, that Pacific Ocean is huge. He said, that's just the top of it.
Okay.
Wow.
Hey, welcome, Sengir.
What a thought. That is just the top of it. There's a lot of water in these oceans out there. When the climbers got to the top Mount Everest, 1953.
Do you have a degree in the field of science, or are you just very science literate? I'm just very science literate, but I'm actually looking it up. I'm researching as we go. This is not entirely my knowledge. Some of it is my knowledge that I already had because I already debunked a lot of this stuff like years and years and years ago. And I'm very, very interested in science facts generally. But yeah, I'm just looking it up as I go pretty much.
The year I was born, they got up here on Mount Everest. They began to find something interesting. Petrified clams on top Mount Everest.
Oysters 11.5 feet wide on top of Mount Everest. Let's see. Petrified? Is that what he said? Oysters. I think that there is something to the claim that there are basically sea creature fossils on top of mountains because the mountains didn't start out as mountains. However, the Appalachian Mountains, those are older than life itself, so you don't find fossils in the Appalachian Mountains, fascinatingly. There are some in some areas of the mountains, but the Appalachian Mountains start in Ireland and end in like West Virginia, Tennessee area or whatever. And some areas of those mountains you don't find fossils. I think that's really interesting. Just looking here. All right, here's the situation with Mount Everest fossils. The summit of Mount Everest consists of Ordovician limestone deposits in a warm, shallow water sea about 450 million years ago, containing fossils of marine animals such as brachiopods, condonants, and crinoids. Fossils found on Mount Everest include trilobites, brachiopods, crinoids, sea lilies, condonants, extinct eel-like creatures, and ostracods, tiny crustaceans. The 11-foot wide oysters claim is false. There are zero credible sources mentioning 11.5-foot oysters on Mount Everest. This is just nonsense, completely fabricated. There is confusion about Everest fossils with shells commonly mentioned, but few sources given and attempts to trace the information often hit blanks and dead links. So yes, there are fossils on Mount Everest, some. There are not fossils like this on there. That's complete nonsense. But mountains weren't always mountains. Mountains are the result of tectonic plates ramming into each other and oftentimes going like one on top of the other, and they kind of turn into a taller structure as a result. They were not always that tall structure. At one time, they were level. At one time, they were covered by oceans. That's just how all of this works. Didn't you do a video on Hovind's canopy theory in the really old days? Yes, I did, in fact. I did, long and long ago. We're going to cover all of it again, though. I'm doing it all over again, because it's so fascinating to me.
In Peru, a couple years ago, they found giant oysters up to 11 feet across, 2 miles above sea level.
Again, 2 miles above sea level, possibly, I suppose, maybe? But I don't understand what he thinks that's proving. That's not proving anything. Yeah, I mean, mountains weren't always mountains, okay? Just a reminder, I would really appreciate it if you guys checked out my Patreon. If you're not going to donate, you don't have to, but follow me there at the very least. owenmorgan.com/Patreon. Just in case some thing happens with the government or whatever, it would be really good if you had some way to connect with me and my content. I'm really concerned about that. And maybe you should consider that for other creators too.
That's a big oyster. You should see the pearl. And these clams are interesting. I've got some on the table down here. They're petrified clams in the closed position. Now, think about it for a minute.
Oh,
When a
OMFG, the closed position, you say?
clam dies, it opens. The muscle inside relaxes, the ligaments on the outside pull the shell open almost instantly. When a clam dies, it opens up. How would you get bazillions of petrified clams in the closed position on top of mountains all over the world? Well, I would like to point out, Your Honor, that Mount Everest is a little ways from the beach, number one. Number two, clams do not climb mountains very well.
Again, this is a lie. This was not found on Mount Everest. We found some trilobites and some little crab-type creatures, but this is completely made up.
And number three, when a clam dies, it opens. The best explanation for this is they were buried alive. Sometimes huge beds of these are found. A guy in Opp, Alabama said, Brother Hovind, you want some petrified clams for a museum? I said, yeah. He said, they're 4 feet thick in my backyard. When he rototills his garden, he brings up thousands of petrified clams, closed petrified clams. We've got a bunch in our museum down in Pensacola, Florida. Even fragile items like eggs are found fossilized. I believe the sediments would settle.
I don't understand what point he's getting to. Yes, I mean, fossils exist. Are you surprised by that? Some found on mountains, young Earth creationism. Clams don't always open when they die. The adductor muscle that holds shells closed relaxes at death, but shells don't necessarily, gape wide open. It depends on their position, I guess. Shells remain closed or partially closed depending on sediment pressure, water chemistry, bacterial activity producing gases, position of burial, speed of mineral replacement. I mean, there's a ton of stuff. It's not a surprise to find one that's closed. Many modern dead clams are found closed on beaches today. The fossils aren't even clams. Most bivalve fossils on mountains, like Everest, are brachiopods, lamp shells, not clams. Different anatomy. Ancient marine bivalves from 400 million years ago, these organisms had different muscle structures than modern clams, and he has to know that. You can't convince me he didn't know that.
Out of this flood, fine sediments would preserve things in incredible detail. Here's a fossilized jellyfish. We have an arm to an octopus, fossilized octopus arm in our museum. Soft tissue simply doesn't fossilize. Under very special conditions are required. The Bible says the fountains of the deep broke open. So I think the earth got struck by a meteor. The water underneath went shooting to the surface, and the earth was covered with water. See, the earth's crust is kind of interesting. Pretty thin, actually, in some spots. 3 to 5 miles thick under the crust, under the oceans, and 30 miles thick under the continents. The hot water from inside the earth would come shooting out, and it would kill animals that live within a certain radius of the crack as the hot water escaped.
I mean, there's also bacteria which are extremophiles. They can live in these areas, right? But okay.
As the basalt bulged up in the middle, the plates are going to slide down, explaining, as I said earlier, about the wrinkled mountains. Take a look at these mountains in British Columbia. They've been pressed from the end, wrinkled up. What happened? As the water came shooting out, the hot water would kill all sorts of things within a certain radius. If you poured a gallon of boiling water into your aquarium, it would kill all the fishies within a certain distance, okay, till the temperature was dissipated. All over the world, little tiny creatures called diatoms are found dead in great big thick beds called diatomaceous earth.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah, definitely. Diatomaceous earth. It's this powder substance that you can get. It's kind of like chalk or something, a little bit like chalk, but it's powdered, and you can sprinkle it all over your floor, and it will basically, it's like glass almost it's very, very fine. When a bug walks through it, like a roach or a bed bug or whatever, a pest of some sort, and then they groom themselves, they basically swallow this little diatomaceous earth, these little crystals, and it cuts their insides up like glass. But it doesn't hurt humans at all. It's food safe. So it basically, and it also absorbs any water, and it dries them out completely. It's pretty fascinating stuff, actually, the way that it works. Interesting, the book of Jasher is a lost text. That is, it was already lost before the Bible was being compiled, since there's no record, many texts claiming to be legit or fakes. That's fascinating. I did not know about that. The Book of Jasher. Diatomaceous earth under a microscope. If I remember, it looks a lot like little tiny fossils. All right, this looks like the best picture of diatomaceous earth under a microscope that we're going to find. That's really fascinating, though, right? See if we got more. Yeah, here you go. Also, there's chalk. There's actual chalk. Nebraska used to be a river, or not a river. It used to connect to the ocean. It used to be part of the ocean long and long ago. And sea creatures with shells would die, float to the bottom, and then just kind of solidify there and merge with the other sea creatures. And that's why you find chalk underneath the soil in Nebraska, because it's like a combination of all of the seashells from the creatures that died over the millennia. It combined into large sheets that you can dig up and pull up out of the ground and use on blackboards. It's fascinating, right? When you use chalk on blackboards, you're using ancient, millions of years old sea creatures to write on stuff. Looks like Chex Mix, kind of. Yeah, a little bit.
These diatoms are super tiny. It takes about 1,000 years to get an inch of dead diatoms at the bottom of the ocean. They very slowly accumulate. When it dries out, they pack it into a special powder called diatomaceous earth. It is used for all sorts of things. It's used as kitty litter. It's used...
I don't know about that one, but yeah, it's used as all sorts of things, for sure.
As oil dry. Diatomaceous earth is used as swimming pool filters, used in bricks, used in aspirin. It's used in medicines. It's used in all sorts of strange things you would never think of. It's diatomaceous earth, because it is so absorbent. I was in Lompoc, California preaching, and I went to visit the world's largest diatomaceous earth quarry. I believe it's the world's largest. They're in Lompoc, California, which is right smack on top of the San Andreas Fault. There in Lompoc, California, back in 1876, they found the fossil skeleton of a whale standing on end, 80 feet long, running through diatomaceous earth. Now, I know the whale is parallel with the layers. That's okay, because the layers have tilted up also. So the thickness of the whale becomes the problem, not the length. But still, if this stuff accumulates an inch every 1,000 years, how long is a dead whale going to lay there waiting for this stuff to gather around him?
Again, so I see. He's using this as evidence that it happened instantly and not over a long period of time. There was a period of time when this stuff was very soft, and he made the same claim with trees forever, like years and years and years ago, where there are petrified trees standing up through the geologic column or whatever.
Earth quarry, I believe it's the world's largest. They're in Lompoc, California, which is right smack on top of the San Andreas Fault. There in Lompoc, California, back in 1876, they found the fossil skeleton of a whale standing on end, 80 feet long, running through diatomaceous earth. Now, I know the whale is parallel with the layers. That's okay, because the layers have tilted up also. So the thickness of the whale becomes the problem, not the length.
Okay, this is, so diatomaceous earth forms at 1 inch per 1,000 years, is what I believe he said. But there's an 80-foot whale standing vertically in it. Here's the problem with it. The accumulation rate is wildly wrong. Diatomaceous earth accumulation varies enormously by location. Modern ocean floor is 0.1 to 1 centimeter per 1,000 years. It's very slow. Productive coastal upswelling zones is 10 to 100 centimeters per 1,000 years. Ancient deposits rates vary dramatically based on conditions. Hovind cherry picks the slowest rate and pretends it's universal when it is not. Oh shit, I'm dying. He's likely referring to Lompoc, California fossil whales in the Monterey Formation, diatomaceous earth deposit. I think that's what he said, right? Yeah, that's what he's referring to. Okay. The whales are not perfectly vertical. They're angled or curved. They didn't stand there while sediment slowly accumulated around them, obviously. Here's what happened. Whales died, sank to the seafloor. They were rapidly buried by underwater landslides and sediment flows. Rapid burial does happen in normal geology. There's nothing surprising about this. Here's what the Lompoc whales actually show. Episodic burial in submarine environment. Multiple species over millions of years. I'm sorry. So Hovind presents either impossibly slow or global flood, when in reality, normal geology includes both slow accumulation and rapid burial events. Here's a modern example. 1980, Mount St. Helens mud flows buried trees rapidly. And there's we talked about this previously. There's a lake bed near Mount St. Helens with trees standing up in it that are eventually going to be those petrified trees that Hovind was talking about that stand straight up in the geologic column. Like, we can watch this process unfold actively today, now. There's nothing, like, surprising about this, and it does not point to a global flood. It just doesn't.
Running through diatomaceous earth. Now, I know the whale is parallel with the layers. That's okay, because the layers have tilted up also. So the thickness of the whale becomes the problem, not the length. But still, if this stuff accumulates an inch every 1,000 years, how long is a dead whale going to lay there waiting for this stuff to gather around him? Dead whales are dissolved at the bottom of the ocean in a few weeks or months. Even the bones eventually disappear.
That depends. Not necessarily. Under oceanic conditions, the bones will disappear. But if it's in sediment or whatever, it will fossilize instead of the bones fully disappearing. The Titanic, the bones were gone within 50 years, I believe. And you can, like, people go down there today to see the Titanic, and pictures that we have from 1997 show things that are no longer there because they dissolved. Like the captain's bathtub, for example, is dissolved. It's gone. I'm curious, did the captain of the Titanic survive? Certainly not, right? Edward Smith did not survive. He died when the ship sank and his body was never recovered. Final moments are not definitively known. Most accounts agree he went down with the ship, though there are conflicting eyewitness stories about his actions, such as helping others or being swept overboard. Interesting.
They gave me a chunk of their diatomaceous earth out there. In that one little square foot, there are dozens, maybe even up to 60 fish skeletons. You know, fish skeletons are found in diatomaceous earth, and they're found with their gills extended, their fins extended. They died terrified.
Okay.
Whatever was happening to them was terrifying these creatures.
I mean, some of them maybe, I suppose, but I don't know what point he's trying to get at here. Are you saying that they realized they're being fossilized and that scared the bejesus out of them to be fossilized?
Fossil fish are found by the trillions. The chalk cliffs of England and Dover, England are found this way. Chalk, from the Latin word crescia, which means chalk. Chalk 300 feet thick. There was a catastrophe that formed all this.
Oh, give it a fucking rest, dude. By the way, what would happen to terrify a fish, you think? Are fish terrified when they die? There are claims from a few people on board Titanic that he jumped in the water and even tried to get on a lifeboat after the boat didn't have enough room. But the boat didn't have enough. Damn, that sucks. That's a shame. Sorry for him. It's gonna be a nightmare. Gills usually expand after death. I mean, literally everything that he's saying is complete nonsense. This is not how any of this works.
The Bible says the waters prevailed upon the earth. I think what happened during the first part of the flood, dead things settled out. And that flood represents God's judgment on this planet. Point number 5 of the Hovind theory is during the first few months of the flood, the dead animals would settle out. People ask, why aren't more human fossils found? Well, humans are smarter than animals.
Okay.
Some humans are, and some animals. And they would tend to avoid drowning till the last possible minute.
Because animals don't try to avoid drowning at the last possible minute, you see.
Animals that are buried on top or very, very shallow soil are not going to fossilize. Think of all the millions of buffalo that were killed out west in the last few hundred years. None of them fossilized because they weren't buried. So fossils only form if an animal is buried pretty deeply and pretty quickly before it has time to decay. Marvin Lubenow says about 4,000 sets of human remains have been found. I think there are fewer humans than animals found fossilized because they were smarter and would avoid drowning till later in the flood, and therefore they're not going to be fossilized.
No, give it a fucking rest, dude. What an absurd claim. Seriously, do I even need to debunk this in a scientific way? We don't have fossilized human beings from, layers 100,000 years ago because humans were smarter. Okay, well, tell me this then. Why don't we find rabbits in the Precambrian era? That is one of the falsifiable claims of evolution. You will not find rabbits, like rabbit fossils, skeletons, in the Precambrian era of the geologic column. Because rabbits didn't exist in the Precambrian era, of course. What's your claim? I mean, how are you going to deal with that fact, Kent Hovind? You can't deal with that fact. This is not something that he can explain. So what does he do? He ignores it. And he redirects to a different claim. Well, why don't we see humans in the Precambrian? Because they tried to swim to the top. That makes complete sense. Then why don't we find massive piles of bodies on mountaintops like that, if that's true?
More on that in video 7. The trees that are uprooted would float around in big log mats the size of Texas. They're going to be buried and become the coal seams that we see today. Moving water does some very interesting phenomena. As water is moving, it automatically sorts things. It can form 5 or 6 layers simultaneously.
Yeah, he made this claim before as well. Things that, all right, when water, let's say you take a jar and you have a bunch of different substances, you have dirt, you have rocks, you have whatever, and you shake it up like this and you set it down, it is going to organize into layers based on heaviness and a variety of other factors. That's not what we see in the geologic column. That's not how they're organized. They're organized completely differently. They're organized in an identical way to what we would expect if millions and billions of years had passed. They are not organized in a way that we would expect to see if you put them in a jar and shook them up like this and set it down.
There's a good videotape called Experiments in Stratification that shows the top strata can actually be older than the bottom strata. If the water's moving, it forms multiple layers simultaneously. Moving water does some strange things. How many have ever seen those things you buy at the store with 2 pieces of glass and different colored sand in between? And when you flip it over, it forms all these layers real quickly, okay?
Yeah, again, he talked about this previously. This is not how it works in real life. This is how it works in a jar with certain types of substances. That does not work that way in real life.
It doesn't take a long time. Stratification can happen very quickly. Underwater landslides, like the one we saw in Indonesia in 2004, can cause, it's called a turbidity current. They can do enormous damage underwater, causing tsunamis on the surface, which kill 250,000 people. In 1929, there was an underwater landslide that traveled 70 miles an hour, cut 2 transatlantic cables. That one landslide covered 40,000 square miles. That's about the size of Ohio. One landslide underwater. During the flood, the water would be swirling around, and the dead animals would tend to, get caught in these little swirls called eddies. This happens today. If you walk along the river, you see the river moving one direction, but along the sides, there's little eddies swirling water. This would happen on a global scale during the flood of Noah. As the animals would float around for a few weeks, they would rot, and their head falls off, and tail falls off, and legs fall off. And when they finally get buried, you end up with tangled up messes of dinosaur bones.
Okay, so you're telling me that dinosaurs were not shaped the way we understand them to be shaped today? You're telling me that, like, the T-Rex didn't really have ferocious teeth or something, and that was from a different creature? What?
Notice these backbones here have no head attached, no legs, just the backbone. Underwater landslides do enormous damage, and surface animals buried on the surface under mud can be in tangled up messes. Fossil graveyards are very common all over the planet.
I don't understand what he's getting at here, talking about. Okay.
By the way, guys, check out my new shop, owenmorgan.com/shop. I have a bunch of really cool designs on there.
They found a concentration of fossils like logs in a log jam. If you go to San Jacinto Monument in Texas, where Santa Anna finally met his match when the Texans caught up with him, the whole monument is made out of fossils. I mean, you look at the blocks of rock, it looks like great big blocks of stone, and they are. As you get up closer, there are bazillions of little tiny fossils in them. There's 4 animals that are found fossilized in the swimming position, their head held up high out of the water.
Not true. Hang on. Let me just look this up, because I remember this. This is not exactly right. So the claim is fossils were found in the swimming position, and that proves they were buried alive instantly in the flood, not slowly over time. Here's the reality. Fossils with bodies curved and arched backward were found. That doesn't mean they were swimming. That's not swimming position. Their limbs extended or splayed, not the natural resting position of a dead animal. This is what he means when he says swimming. Hovind implies they were swimming when the flood waters buried them. No, they were just not in a resting position. The actual cause is post-mortem muscle contraction. Ligament desiccation, drying out, pulling the body backward, muscle and tendon contraction as tissues decay and dry, rigor mortis in some cases before burial. This is not evidence that they were swimming. They weren't.
I believe they probably got caught in the mud as the mud settled out of the water, and they drowned or died in the swimming position. In one place in Africa called the Karoo Formation, they said there are 800,000 million skeletons of vertebrate animals. A lot of animals died at one time. They found iguanodon skeletons in a Belgian coal mine extending through 100 feet of rock in the vertical position. Up in Canada on Axel Island, they find petrified redwood stumps.
Let me just check this one. Let me check this about the iguanodon. Iguanodon. What does an iguanodon look like anyway? Sounds metal as fuck. Okay, it's significantly less metal than I expected, actually. It looks like a doofus, to be perfectly frank. Interesting. An iguanodon. Where are its feathers? We need its feathers. It had feathers, right? There you go. This is a little closer to it, I think, maybe. The discovery is genuine. Location, Bressenart, Belgium coal mine. Date, 1878. 1,000 feet below the surface. Wow, that is deep. 38 iguanodon skeletons were found. Spectacular preservation. That's really interesting, actually. The bodies were spread through 30 meters or 100 feet of sediment. They were from 125 million years ago, early Cretaceous. Again, you'll never find a rabbit in that era. You won't find a rabbit there with iguanodon skeletons, ever. That's one of the falsifiable claims of evolution. If you do find a rabbit in there, then it disproves sections of evolutionary theory. But no one ever has. Okay, this area was a ravine or a sinkhole that filled with water. Iguanodons fell in, got trapped, drowned over time. Those poor little guys, I feel for them. Bodies accumulated at different levels as sediment gradually filled the depression. Not all buried at once. They died over an extended period, possibly thousands of years. Seasonal flooding, gradual infilling of the ravine led to this situation. But Hovind is implying there's 100 feet of vertical burial, which is an instant catastrophic flood. That's not what happened. The deposit was a localized ravine or channel, not a flat plain suddenly buried. There was natural topographic low point where carcasses accumulated. That's what it was. Like how animals today get trapped in sinkholes, tar pits, ravines, so on and so forth. He's just completely full of shit here.
Up in Canada on Axel Island, they find petrified redwood stumps.
Redwood stumps. Okay, so?
You can go to Axel Island. There are no trees on Axel Island. There are certainly no redwood trees growing there. How do we get fossilized redwood stumps on Axel Island?
Well, there were once trees there? I don't understand what your hang-up is here. Why are you confused by this? Their thumbs were their defense weapon. It was sharp, and they could jab their thumb into their attacker's neck. Okay. The fossils of the redwoods apparently are real. Axel Heiberg Island, Canadian Arctic, aged 45 to 50 million years ago, Eocene epoch. But they're not redwoods. They're mostly dawn redwood, plus pine, spruce, cypress, relatives. Why there are no trees there now? The Arctic was warm and frosted 45 to 50 million years ago, and now it's not. See how that works? I don't get like his hang up. What's the issue? What is your issue here? How do you think this proves creationism?
People say, well, hey, doesn't it take millions of years for things to petrify? No, things petrify quickly. There are scores of examples can be given where things have petrified in less than 100 years. Okay? 2 horse hoofs were found petrified in Oregon. People say, well, hey, doesn't it take millions of years for things to petrify? No, things petrify quickly.
No, they don't. I remember he covered this in one of his other episodes, but no, they don't petrify quickly. Petrification means basically slowly replacing with minerals, I believe, replacing the pieces with minerals so that ultimately it looks like the original object, the original skeleton or whatever, but it's made out of rock effectively. Now, as a result of the petrification process. This just is not how it works. What he's describing here does not petrify instantly, or quickly even.
There are scores of examples can be given where things have petrified in less than 100 years. Okay? 2 horse hoofs were found petrified in Oregon. A petrified water wheel shown here in this picture. Just the minerals replaced the wood. Here's petrified firewood. Here's a fishing reel stuck in a rock. They said the rock...
I'm sorry, let me step back one more time.
Hoofs were found. Petrify? No, things petrify quickly. There are scores of examples can be given where things have petrified in less than 100 years. Okay? 2 horse hoofs were found petrified in Oregon. A petrified water wheel shown here in this picture. Just the minerals replaced the wood. Here's petrified firewood. Here's a fishing reel stuck in a rock.
All right, let's just fact check some of these.
A petrified water wheel.
Hold on. One more.
People say, well, hey, doesn't it take millions of years for things to petrify? No, things petrify quickly. There are scores of examples can be given where things have petrified in less than 100 years. Okay? 2 horse hoofs were found petrified in Oregon. A petrified water wheel shown here in this picture. Just the minerals replaced the wood. Here's petrified firewood. Here's a fishing reel stuck in a rock. It said the rock was 300 million years old. By the way, if any of you students want to make some money, University Chattanooga, Tennessee.
All right, let me just look these claims up. He made a bunch there. Regarding the horse hooves, recent horse hooves can petrify in under a century, proving fossils don't need millions of years. That's the claim. Here's reality. No credible evidence exists for this specific claim. This appears to be either a confusion with other rapid fossilization claims, a misidentification of mineralized horseshoes or boots, or complete fabrication. I'm leaning complete fabrication. Number 2, petrified water wheel firewood, teddy bears, hats apparently are part of the claim. Here's the reality. The Knaresborough Petrifying Well, Yorkshire, England. The famous Yorkshire waterfall coats objects with calcium carbonate in 3 to 5 months for small porous items like teddy bears. However, this is not fossilization or petrification. What's actually happening is water with extremely high mineral content drips over objects, depositing calcium carbonate, like stalactites and stalagmites, the way that stalactites and stalagmites form. The original material remains unchanged underneath. It has not been replaced with rock or whatever. True petrification involves replacing it with minerals. It's mineral deposition or incrustation, the same process that creates limescale in your kettle, not petrification. And most of this stuff is just like fabricated. There's absolutely no evidence of any of it. For example, there are a bunch of claims of man-made objects found in ancient coal, like the iron pot in coal, the fishing reel in 300-million-year-old rock. There's just no documentation of this. There's no evidence of any of this. The iron pot claim relies solely on a letter written in 1948, 36 years after the alleged 1912 discovery, with no photographs, no preserved coal specimens, and no independent verification. Newton Anderson's Bell, the discoverer, admittedly destroyed all the coal evidence by cleaning it with lye and a scrub brush. No coal remained attached for analysis. No chain of custody, no professional excavation documentation, and it's literally impossible for this to have actually taken place. So until we get actual real evidence of this extraordinary claim, we can't believe it, because as we know, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, right? Now, regarding the post-mining contamination, the pot was found at an electric plant after coal processing, not in situ in the mine. The bottom line is we have no evidence that any of this is real, and we do have evidence that Hovind just makes shit up brazenly, regularly. So he's gonna have to come with something, anything. I will take any evidence at all, please. When you come with evidence, then I'll believe it, and I'll try to understand what happened.
University of Tennessee at Chattanooga studied this thing, talked to the guy who owned it, and analyzed the whole thing and said, man, this is amazing, a reel stuck in a rock. This
is not true. This is not real. This is just completely fictitious.
You can locate the owner of the reel and get me in touch with him. I want to see if he wants to put it on loan in our museum. And anybody who can find me, the owner, Dan Jones, find me the guy, get me his phone number, and let me talk to him. I'll give you $50 do some research. If you're sleuths up here in Tennessee, you want to work on that one. UTC geology experts can't explain this. Why? How could a fishing reel be found?
It's not real. It's fake. There's no evidence. There's no documentation. There's no nothing. It's completely fictitious. And besides that, if there was evidence of this happening, I would look for obvious natural explanations before I jumped straight to some supernatural trash.
Rock. If you go to Waycross, Georgia, they've got on display there at the Southern Forest World a mummified dog stuck in a tree. The dog apparently chased a coon up the tree and got stuck, and the dog is mummified. The tree was still alive. They named the dog Stucky. Here's a petrified cow.
Oh, very funny. Stucky. Hang on. Just checking for info on this. Stucky, the claim is that Stucky the mummified dog proves fossilization or petrification happens rapidly. The reality is this actually disproves his position. Here's what happened. A hunting dog named Stucky got stuck inside a hollow chestnut oak tree in approximately 1960 while chasing prey. The dog climbed about 28 feet up inside the hollow trunk, became wedged as the tree narrowed, and died there. Loggers discovered the mummified remains about 20 years later in 1980. The key point, this is mummification, not fossilization. What are you even trying to prove with this? Mummification is preservation of original organic tissue through drying. Fossilization and petrification are replacement of organic tissue with minerals. This is not petrification.